Hello, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors. I thought I'd start up again doing a little bit of reading of Hamlet with you all. Great deal of time has passed since last I did any kind of video with you, and there are different reasons for that we don't need to get into. And there are things to comment on in the world and the political scene and rackety rack, but I'm not going to do any of that. I don't want to do any of that. I want to read Shakespeare with you. That's what I want to do. Talk about Shakespeare with you. And think a little bit about this great play, Hamlet, because I haven't even gotten to the end of Act 1 yet. So, prepping for this morning, looking at it, notice that Shakespeare's play has Acts 4 and 5 run continuously as a single event. And so we're going to run those together and read both today. And to comment a little bit about them, up till now, I've been talking about Hamlet as an example of the scholastic debate of the 13th century. Now, don't get me wrong, there are lots of different ways that we can interpret Hamlet. Feminist interpretation, historical accuracy, autobiographical, philosophical, theological, psychoanalytical. So what I'm doing is not going to rule out any of those. It's another way of looking at the play, which might provide insight into why this play is great and what Shakespeare was actually doing. Remember that the scholastic debate was that debate between the two camps of the nominalists and the realists. And it dealt primarily with our perception of the world around us. Do we perceive the world as something real, as connected to another worldly existence, a metaphysical existence? Or do we perceive the world as not having any connection to another worldly existence at all? If we say that our ideas and our thoughts and our language and the world around us all conform to a hierarchy of reality that goes all the way back to the source of the real, which we deem to be God, then we fall into a camp that's called the realist camp. If, on the other hand, we say that there is no source for all of this, there's no pattern or order to it outside of a sort of physical order, and that the language and ideas that we use are pure, they're human constructs in order to deal with the world around us, then we fall into a camp which said that these were in name only, this thing, not connected to a reality beyond this world, but in name only. And that name only was the nominalist camp, the camp that said that nomen in Latin was the only thing, the nominalism. And philosophers during that time really parsed out this problem of whether or not what we're dealing with when we deal with the world is a ladder to find out the divine, or whether it is simply a dealing with the physicality of the world and sorting it into categories and boxes. And they talked about what was called the quiddity, or the essence of the thing. What is the essence of bird, or the essence of tree, or what have you? The quiddity. And there's another term that they use, haexiety, which is the thingness of that individual thing, not just bird in general, abstracted, but that thing particular, that bird right over there on the fence, the haexiety. And Hamlet, who graduates from Wittenberg College, is really somebody who is wrestling tremendously with the fallout of learning about this way of looking at the world, where there is no hierarchy of being. There's no great chain of being anymore. There's simply the language that we use to determine one thing from the next. The idea of the chain of being is primarily Platonic. It comes from Plato. It's a Platonic idea. And it's the idea that really governed over European thought for, well, quite some time, up until the 12 or 1300s. Aristotelian thought, it goes the opposite way. Instead of sort of from the source of being down to individual things, Aristotle thought about individual things and extracted from them, or abstracted from them, to general principles or ideas. So just as Plato went this way, Aristotle went that way. And Platonic thought led to the realist idea that what we're dealing with down here in individual things leads us up to the point where we can understand the divine mind himself. And Aristotelian thought went the opposite way. Looking at all this individual stuff, we can abstract to general principles, but we don't abstract to something beyond this world. So really, Hamlet is wrestling with the fallout of this new thinking that was introduced through Africa and then through Spain in the realm of Platonic thought, Aristotelian thought. Because what happened was that the works of Aristotle were translated into, they were lost to Europe mainly, and then they were translated into Arabic, and then they went across the coast of North Africa and the Muslim world, and then they came into Spain, and they were translated into Latin, and then they came back into Europe. And so it's sort of this roundabout way that Aristotle's ideas got introduced back into Europe. And that was what caused this great debate in the 1200s, was that reintroduction of these great works by Aristotle back into culture. Or at least it reignited it, because I think it had been around for a while. So one of the pieces of fallout that we're dealing with here is whether or not what we perceive is really real, or whether what we perceive is itself illusion, a sort of a matrix, a womb. That's Latin, matrix. A womb in which we're living that isn't really real. It's a facsimile or a simulacrum of real life. And Hamlet, who is already kind of an emo character, is looking for some confirmation that this other world is really real. So what we're going to read today is we're going to read about Hamlet's encounter with a ghost. Now there's a lot of ink spilled over this, and that is this ghost honest? Is this ghost dishonest and trying to trap him? Is the ghost his father, or is it a demon in the form of his father? Or is the ghost simply an aspect of his fevered brain? And I was reflecting the other day on what the ghost is going to ask of Hamlet. Not to spoiler alert, right? Okay, for those of you who don't want to hear this part, I'm sorry. Go ahead and read the play first, and then you can understand what I'm about to say. The ghost says to Hamlet, I got killed by your uncle. He killed me and in my garden, and you need to find a way to avenge my death. Which, by the way, normally means kill your uncle. But the ghost says, in doing this, don't harm your mom and don't taint your mind. Taint not your mind, the ghost says. And what does that mean? That's a really interesting little thing. Don't harm your mom, your mother, and don't taint your mind. Well, the first part about harming your mom, that's kind of obvious. Just don't hurt Gertrude. Don't hurt the character who's on the stage. But recall that when Shakespeare's writing this, there's a lot of symbolic nature to the play. Fathers, in some ways, represent the vision of God. Mothers, in some way, represent the care or nurturing of God, if that makes sense. So in the Catholic Church, for instance, we liken the deity, God, to a father. We say, our Father who art in heaven, Pater Noster, right? But then we liken the nurturing part, the loving part, the alma mater, the loving or nurturing mother, we liken that to the Virgin Mary, who is the spouse of God. So we liken mothers to that nurturing and that loving and that caring aspect of the divine. So if we look at the play as sort of symbolic of that, maybe, I'm not putting this out here for pure review or anything right now. Don't give a like if you like it. Maybe the don't harm your mother might mean don't destroy that loving, caring aspect of yourself when you go and murder your uncle. How do you do that? How's Hamlet supposed to do that? He's encouraged by the ghost to seek revenge for his father's death, which means we would think, go and kill this guy. But do it in a loving way. Continue to love things, to love the world, to be nurturing in your nature. As anybody who's ever been in any kind of conflict before, or anybody who's ever had to take a human life before can tell you, this is a really difficult conundrum. How do you go about doing your job and at the same time be innocent and nurturing and loving and happy? Most of the time you end up being traumatized. You end up with PTSD after the fact. So it's a very narrow window that the ghost offers to Hamlet as far as this goes. Now it may be different in the medieval mind, or maybe different in the Elizabethan mind, because of course they lived with violence all the time, and frequently there was the idea of the warrior saint, who like Saint Louis, for instance, who was capable of going and slaughtering his enemies, but also remaining pure and noble and virtuous. So maybe Shakespeare doesn't have as big an issue with it. But I've never found anything in Shakespeare that's easy. Everything in Shakespeare is really complex. I mean, the guy wrote plays that challenged his own time, but challenged future generations as well. So I'm thinking that when he says don't hurt your mother, meaning don't lose that aspect of nurturing when you go to murder your uncle, I think he's setting up a paradox. I think he's setting up a problem that really needs to be sorted out. How is Hamlet to do this? And then the other aspect is, taint not your mind. To taint means to make impure, or to sully, or to dirty. Don't dirty your mind when you do it. So find a way to kill your uncle. Make him really pay for his deeds. But don't become evil. Don't dwell on evil things. Taint not your mind. So how do you do that? Right? How do you make another person suffer and not yourself have to engage in suffering? Jordan Peterson points this out, that the person who does cruelty had to think of the cruelty first. You don't just skip around like Pollyanna and say, yeah, life is beautiful, I'm so happy, and I'm going to rip your fingernails off and put salt on them, It's just not the way humans work. You can't be both the court torturer and also the innocent, beautiful child still. And yet, there's this thing that Scripture tells us, right? In order to inherit the kingdom of God, you must become like one of these children. You have to be reborn, born again. So you have to recover a certain innocence. That's the whole image of the Garden of Eden, the loss of innocence. You read the Garden of Eden story in Genesis how you wish. But one way you can read it is that as human beings, all of us face a point in our life when we have to grow up. We have to mature. We have to take responsibility for our lives and the lives of others. And sometimes that means having to do violence. Sometimes it means having to do difficult things or face difficult things. That's a tremendously tough position to be in, because you on the one hand want to be innocent and happy and loving, and then you pass through and suddenly you're not. It's like, how do you recover that? When I teach young people, I say, look, you're normally at the level of 10th grade, 11th grade, you're in a position where before your life was happy and relatively concern-free, and your parents knew what they were doing, and Santa Claus came every Christmas, and then something happened. What was it? Suddenly mom and dad didn't know what they were doing. Suddenly you had all these worries. Suddenly you found out certain things were not real anymore. And how do you deal with that? How do you grapple with that? Well, that's the getting pushed out of Eden. It's the getting pushed out of that state of innocence, where suddenly you have to grapple with good and evil, right, from the tree. I think that the ghost is proposing to Hamlet a paradox which is similar to the paradox that pushes Adam and Eve out of the garden. Now that Hamlet's not innocent at the beginning of the play. Don't get me wrong here. He's not innocent, and then the ghost comes and suddenly he's jaded. No, he's very jaded even before that. But I think he's jaded to some degree because of his time at Wittenberg College. I remember that historically Wittenberg is also the place. Martin Luther, who was drove the Reformation in England. He himself nailed the theses to the church door at Wittenberg College, right? That was in 1517 when he nailed the 95 theses objecting to church abuses to the door of the college. We see that as a sort of a violent act now, but it wasn't really. At the college, when you had a thesis that you were putting forth, series of objections or a series of proposals, you would nail them on the public bulletin board so that everybody else could review them. It was a peer review. And that was at the church door. So what he does is not, take these clean doors and sully them by nailing his theses to them. It'd be sort of like going into the student commons at college and stapling something to the cork board, right? But nevertheless, that's when he proposes these in print. These abuses of the church have to stop. And it was sort of a rallying cry for the Reformation that was occurring in the church. So if you will, there's a sort of shift that occurs, as indicating a sea change that had been going on before. And here is young Hamlet, who has gone to Wittenberg College, we assume sometime between 1517 and 1599 when the play is written. Young Hamlet has gone to Wittenberg College, and he has been jaded by what he has seen, and he's having to grapple with it. So, if he is asked to kill his uncle, that is, to avenge his father's death, and then taint not his mind and harm not his mother, he's between a rock and a hard place. There's a paradox going on, and the paradox is one which I think makes him not entirely impotent, but incapable of acting correctly, because he doesn't quite know the right course of action. There's a lot of politics going on too, of course, because the king has the power, and you don't just go up and just stab the king without some repercussion. But I think more to the point is that he doesn't know whether this is the right course of action. Do I go forward knowing for sure that this is the murderer of my father, and this is the right thing to do? Or do I not go forward and just let the man live? Because who knows whether he killed my father or not. And how do I do this without tainting my mind? And how do I do this without hurting my mother, who's married to my uncle now? A lot of people have accused Hamlet, for instance, of not making up his mind. In fact, the Laurence Olivier production of, I think, the 1940s, which was famous at the time, but I find it very dated now, so watch it as a time capsule of what was emphasized in Shakespeare at the time. At the very opening of the movie, it says, "This is the story of a man who could not make up his mind." Well, if that's all it is, then why am I watching this play, right? It kind of drains all the tension out of it. But the tension, see, comes from not knowing what the right course is, but being between the Scylla and Charybdis of completely destroying your life, damning yourself, you might say, and by doing this action, and not being able to find revenge or put things right at all. How do you act between these two realms, right? Of seek revenge but taint not your mind, avenge my murder but don't hurt your mother. That's really tough. Now, I would say, look at it as a philosophical problem. It's very much the problem of the scholastic debate. How does a man or a woman process in the world and act and have confidence that what they're doing makes any difference at all if this world is all there is? How do you do the right thing if you don't have absolute assurance that there is an otherworldliness? What is the right thing? Maybe it's just your opinion. Maybe right and wrong are purely crafted in your mind. Maybe what we had thought previously right is actually wrong. What action should we take, right? Should we put our fist in the air and riot? Maybe burning things is the answer to everything, or pulling down our statues and obliterating our past history. Maybe beating up other people who have opposite opinions from us is the right course of action. Because who knows, which course should we take? And either we're acting and we're beating people up because they don't have the same assuredness that we have, that there's another worldliness. We know right. They don't know right. They're wrong. Let's beat them up. Or we're taking action now in this world to set things straight because there's nothing beyond this world, and right and wrong is your opinion, and so I'm going to beat you up. All that seems like a lot of nonsense. In my humble, personal, crafted opinion. And yet it's nonsense which I think develops from the struggle between these two camps. Even in our current world, we could say, one could make the comment, that our current world suffers a great deal from extremes in one area or the other. Either the extremity that there is nothing beyond this world, this is all we have, we need to find a political solution, and we need that political solution tomorrow, today even, this afternoon, yesterday. It's too late, you must pay. Or we're so assured of our rightness of our cause, and everything we do is guided by the hand of the divine, and therefore all those who don't believe are blasphemers and should be stoned until dead. Both camps are very problematic. And if you wrestle between the two extremes, or if you try to hold the two together at the same time, you always have this nagging doubt that what you're doing is the right course. And yet, a man has to act in the world. You have to do something. You have to be able to profess truth. And you have to be able to progress or move forward in life. You have to help others. How do you do that? Taint not your mind, but seek justice. But harm not your mother, but kill your Uncle Johnny. It is an amazingly hard problem. And it's a hard problem which I think exists very much even in our own world. Now we add to that this issue of whether or not all of this might be a fever dream of Hamlet's own making. Because maybe it is. Maybe on the one hand it's a demon come to tempt Hamlet. Maybe on the other hand it really is his father. Maybe on the third hand it's Hamlet himself. And that this whole thing is concocted in his fevered brain. There's a very good website I would strongly encourage you to check out, The American Mind, AmericanMind.org. And they have a great podcast. I'm really into podcasts. The American Mind podcast is brilliant, and the fellows, there are about 4 or 5 really well-educated guys that get together and talk about issues currently. And in one of them, they were discussing these recent, the whole Seattle thing and the recent riots and the pulling down of statues. And one of the guys was talking in this forum, brought up the idea that every human being has to wrestle with guilt and anger and frustration over their own heritage, their own parentage. Because we grow up thinking that mom and dad know what they're doing. And then at some point we find out that they don't know what they're doing. And that they brought us into this world, and that they didn't prepare us well enough, because they never can. And there's a certain rage and this anger at trying to wrestle with our own lineage. Not just the fact that our parents brought us into the world and didn't give us the tools to be able to actually deal with the world, but that our very DNA, our very flesh itself, is trapped by biology, by the inheritance we get from our parents. And for everybody, it's a problem. And either you learn how to deal with that, or you rage and you defy your parents and you fight them and you put them off as other, and other folks that subscribe to their parental ideas are other. And that's very tough because, as they were pointing out, that's very tough because we never fully get away from that unless we confront it and deal with it and are able to reconcile ourselves to the fact that our parents, yes, are guilty of bringing us into the world, and we are guilty of eventually, if we do, bringing other people into the world, or we are just as responsible for being in the world as our parents are, and we can't blame them any. And that, as they were pointing out in the American Mind, that is one of the biggest hurdles to becoming mature, becoming an adult. That is getting over our own parents. And there's an aspect of the Hamlet play which is frequently talked about. It's called the Oedipal Aspect. That refers to a Greek play, Oedipus Rex, by Sophocles, or in its proper term, Oedipus Tyrannos. I highly encourage you to read it if you haven't already, or if you're not into that whole reading thing, see a good production of it. I'll try and post one here that you can watch. Because Oedipus Rex is one of the greater plays in Greek drama. In fact, it played for quite some time in Greek theater, repeated performances, as we would say, because it was so powerful, and is so powerful. The gist of the play is that the king, the tyrant, the Rex, Oedipus, is ruling over the city that has a plague going through it, and people are dying, and he tries to find out who is responsible for the plague, who's brought this pollution to our city. And he calls forth the soothsayer, Tiresias, and then Tiresias says, "You are responsible." And Oedipus says, "No, I'm not. Take that man away and put him in prison." And his uncle comes, who's been searching for who is responsible. And the uncle says, "You're responsible." And Oedipus says, "No, I'm not." And he yells at his uncle. And then his wife even says, "Maybe you're responsible." And he says, "No, I'm not." But as things become more and more clear and he uncovers more and more evidence as to who might be the plague, he finds he himself is responsible for the plague because he has killed his own father and he's married his mother and had kids with her. The woman that he's married to in the play is actually his own mother. That's where we get what's called an Oedipal complex in psychology. And frequently directors will play this up, with a lot more affection between Hamlet and Gertrude than maybe is desirable. But honestly, I think it's not so much the affection towards Gertrude, it's this wrestling with the fact that your parents brought you into the world. Because at heart, the play Oedipus Rex it's not just a sick little soap opera. It's really about the idea that every human tries to run away from accepting that they've killed the father in them, they've killed the law in them, and have to be autonomous, have to be on their own. And every human tries to run away from the fact that they are genetically or biologically bound to the physical world, the rules of the physical world, and the ultimate physical rule, which is that they'll go back into the earth when they die. The one represented by killing the father, the other represented by marrying the mother. And Oedipus's eventual discovery that he is guilty of both killing the metaphysical law in him and also of still being bound to the earth, the mother, the feminine, his wife and mother, it causes him so much distress that he gouges his own eyes out with needles. And only then, when he's physically blind, is he able to actually see. And I think that is in itself a metaphor, a symbol for our own wrestling with the inheritance that we get from our parents, which is both law, order, structure, and all those metaphysical things, and biology and DNA and nurturing and wrapping us up in loving arms of dirt when we die. deal with that, right? To escape that, to run away from that, to find diversions from that, whether political or in terms of gaining more wealth and material goods, or escaping to a fantasy world somewhere in the Matrix, in the video games, is to remain a child. To grapple with that, to try and understand it, to finally accept it or come to grips with it, is the mark of an adult. And in some ways, becoming an adult means becoming or accepting helplessness. It means putting your eyes out. And only then does the third eye of the soul actually awaken. And to some degree, I think that's what Hamlet, the play, is dealing with too. It's dealing with this, which one is it? Nominalism, realism, masculine, feminine, father, mother. Which one do I accept? Hello? And if I am to grapple with both or hold both, how do I do that and not taint my mind, not hurt my mother? One has to in some ways become helpless, accept the helplessness that every human being is crucified to. And consequently, when we do accept that crucifixion, only then do we rise up again to understanding things in a new light or a new way. If we reject that crucifixion, what do we have left but violence, rioting, pulling things down, yelling at other people and beating other folks up? A political solution, you might say. So, food for thought. Now, to the play. Because I've talked a lot. Let me read a lot to the play. We begin, again, we're in Act 1. This is Scene 4. Act 1, Scene 4 of Hamlet. And if you have your copy, read along with me. Hamlet has been told by his friend Horatio, there's a ghost, and it looks like you're dead. And so he goes to try and talk with or find out more about this. When we begin Act 1, Scene 4, enter Hamlet, Horatio, and Marcellus, who's a guard. Hamlet begins. The air bites shrewdly. It's very cold. Horatio. It is a nipping and an eager air. What hour now? I think it lacks of 12, says Horatio. No, it has struck, says Marcellus. Indeed, I heard it not. It then draws near the season wherein the spirit held his wont to walk. There's a flourish of trumpets and 2 pieces, 2 guns. Goes off, so it's 2 in the morning. What does this mean, my lord? Says Horatio. Ah, the king doth wake tonight, and takes his rouse, keeps wassail, and the swaggering ups rising reels, and as he drains his draughts of Rhenish down, the kettle drum and trumpet does bray out the triumph of his pledge. Is it a custom? Says Horatio. Aye, marry, is't. But to my mind, though I am native here and to the manner born as a custom, more honored in the breach than the observance. This heavy-headed revel east and west makes us traduced and taxed of other nations. They clep us drunkards, and with swinish phrase soil our addition. And indeed it takes from our achievements, though performed at height, the pith and marrow of our attribute. So oft it chances in particular men, as some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin, by the overgrowth of some complexion, oft breaking down the pales and forts of reason, or by some habit that too much o'erleans the form of plausive manners, that these men carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect. Being nature's livery or fortune's star, his virtues else, be they as pure as grace, as infinite as man may undergo, shall, in the general censure, take corruption from that particular fault. The dram of evil doth all the noble substance of a doubt to his own scandal. Enter the ghost. Look, my lord, it comes. Angels and ministers of grace, defend us. Be thou a spirit of health, or a goblin damned, being with thee heirs from heaven or blast from hell. Be thy intents wicked or charitable, thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, king, father, royal Dane. Oh, answer me! Let me not burst in ignorance, but tell why thy canonized bones, hearsed in death, have burst their cerements. Why the sepulchre wherein we saw thee quietly interred hath opened his ponderous and marble jaws to cast thee up again. What may this mean? Thou, dead corse, again in complete steel revisits thus the glimpses of the moon, making night hideous. And we, fools of nature, so horridly to shake our disposition with thoughts beyond the reaches of our souls, say, why is this? Wherefore? What shall we do? The ghost beckons. It beckons you to go with it, says Horatio, as if it some impartment did desire to tell you alone. Look with what courteous action it waves you to a more removed ground, says Marcellus. But do not go with it. No, by no means, says Horatio. It will not speak. Then I will follow it. Do not, my lord. Why? What should be the fear, says Hamlet. I do not set my life at a pin's fee. And for my soul, what can it do to that? Being a thing immortal as itself, it waves me forth again. I'll follow it. Horatio says, what if it tempt you toward the flood, my lord, or to the dreadful summit of the cliff that beetles o'er his base into the sea, and there assumes some other horrible form, which might deprive your sovereignty of reason and draw you into madness? Think of it! The very place puts toys of desperation without more motive into every brain that looks so many fathoms to the sea and hears it roar beneath. It weighs me still. Go on. I'll follow thee. You shall not go, my lord, says Marcellus, and they hold him back. Hold off your hands! Be ruled. You shall not go. My fate cries out, says Hamlet, and makes each petty Artur in this body as hardy as the Nemean lion's nerve. Still, am I called? Unhand me, gentlemen. By heaven, I'll make a ghost of him that lets me. I say away. Go on. Go on. Go on, I'll follow thee. And the ghost and Hamlet exit. Horatio says, he waxes desperate with imagination. Let's follow, says Marcellus. 'Tis not fit thus to obey him. Have after. To what issue will this come? Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, says Marcellus. Heaven will direct it. Nay, let's follow him, says Marcellus, and they exit. Scene 5. Enter Ghost and Hamlet. Hamlet says, whither wilt thou lead me? Speak, I'll go no farther. Mark me. I will, says Hamlet. My hour is almost come.
one eye to sulphurous and tormenting flames, must render up myself.
Alas, poor ghost, says Hamlet.
Pity me not, but lend thy serious hearing to what I shall unfold.
Speak, says Hamlet. I'm bound to hear.
So art thou to revenge when thou shalt hear.
What? Says Hamlet.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain time to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast and fires, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. But that I am forbid to tell the secrets of my prison house, I could a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, make thy two eyes like stars start from their spheres, thy knotted and combined locks to part, and each particular hair to stand on end. But this eternal blazon must not be to years of flesh and blood. List, oh, list, if thou dost ever thy dear father love.
Ah, God, says Hamlet.
Revenge is most foul and unnatural murder. Murder most foul, as in the best it is. But this most foul, strange, and unnatural.
Haste me to know it, that I, with wings as swift as meditation on the thoughts of love, may sweep to my revenge.
I find thee apt, and duller shouldst thou be than the fat weed that roots itself in ease on Lethe wharf. Wouldst thou not stir in this? Now, Hamlet, here. 'Tis given out that sleeping in my orchard a serpent stung me. So the whole year of Denmark is by a forged process of my death rankly abused. But no, thou noble youth, the serpent that did sting me, now, where's my crown?
Oh, my prophetic soul. Ha ha ha.
My uncle. That incestuous, that adulterate beast with witchcraft of his wit, with traitorous gifts, oh, wicked wit and gifts that have the power to seduce one to his shameful lust, the will of my most seeming virtuous queen. Oh, Hamlet, what a falling off was there from me, whose love was of that dignity that it went hand in hand even with the vow I made to her in marriage, and to decline upon a wretch whose natural gifts were poor to those of mine. But virtue, as it never will be moved, though lewdness courted in the shape of heaven, so lust, though to a radiant angel linked, will sate itself in a celestial bed and prey upon garbage. But soft, methinks I scent the morning air, brief that may be, sleeping within my orchard, my custom always of the afternoon. Upon my secure hour, thy uncle stole, with juice of cuss and ebony in a vial, and in the porches of my ears did pour the leprous distilment, whose effect holds such an enmity with blood of man that swifter as quicksilver it courses through the natural gates and alleys of the body, and with a sudden vigor doth posset and cur like eager droppings in the milk the thin and wholesome blood. So did it mine, and a most instant tetter embarked about, most Lazar-like, with vile and loathsome crust all my smooth body. Thus was I, sleeping by a brother's hand, of life, of crown, of queen, at once dispatched, cut off, even in the blossom of my sin, unhouseled, disappointed, unhung, no reckoning made, but sending my account with all my imperfections on my head. Horrible, horrible, most horrible. If thou hast nature in thee, bear it not. Let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest. But howsoever thou pursuest this act, take not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge to prick and sting her. Fare thee well, at once. The glowworm shows the matin to be near, and gins to pale his unaffected fire. I do. remember me.
Oh, you host of heaven. Oh, earth. What else shall I couple hell? Oh, fie. Hold my heart, and you my sinews. Grow not instant old, bear me stiffly up. Remember thee. Thou poor ghost. Whilst memory holds the seal in this distracted globe, remember thee. Yea, from the table of my memory I'll wipe away all trivial, fond memories. All souls of books, all forms, all precious past, that youth and observation copied there, and thy commandment all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain, unmixed with baser matter. Yes, by heaven. O most pernicious woman. O villain, smiling, damning villain. My tables meet it as I set it down, that one may smile and smile and still be a villain. At least I am sure it may be so in Denmark. So, uncle, there you are. Now to my word. It is adieu. Adieu. Remember me. I swore it. Enter Horatio and Marcellus. My lord, says Horatio. Lord Hamlet, says Marcellus. Heaven secure him. So be it. Ho, 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 my lord. Hello. Oh, boy. Come, bird, come. How is it, my noble lord? What news, my lord? Says Horatio. Oh, wonderful. Good my lord, tell it. No, you will reveal it. Not I, my lord. By heaven. No, I, my lord. How say you then? Would heart of man once think it, but you'll be secret? Aye, by heaven, my lord, they respond. There's never a villain dwelling in old Denmark, but he's an errant knave. There needs no ghost, my lord, says Horatio, come from the grave to tell us this. Why? Right, you are in the right. And so, without more circumstance at all, I hold it fit that we shake hands and part. You as your business and desire shall point you, for every man hath business and desire, such as it is, and for my own poor part I will go away. These are but wild and whirling words, my lord, says Horatio. Oh, I am sorry they offend you. Heartily, yes, faith, heartily. There's no offense, my lord, says Horatio. Yes, by St. Patrick, there is, Horatio, and much offense too. Touching this vision here, it is an honest ghost. That, let me tell you, for your desire to know what is between us, or master it as you may. And now, good friends, as you're my friends, scholars, soldiers, give me one poor request. What is, my lord? We will. Never make known what you have seen tonight. My lord, we will not. Nay, but swear it. In faith, my lord. Not I, says Horatio. Nor I, my lord, in faith.
Upon my word, says Hamlet.
We have sworn, my lord, already, says Marcellus.
Indeed. Upon my sword. Indeed. And the ghost cries under the stage. Swear.
Ha ha! Boy, sayest thou so? Art thou there, Truepenny?
Come on, you hear this fellow in the cellarage. Consent to swear.
Propose thy oath, my lord.
Never to speak of this that you have seen. Swear by my sword. Swear, says the ghost. Hic et ubique, says Hamlet. Then we'll shift our ground. Come hither, gentlemen, and lay your hands again upon my sword. Swear by my sword never to speak of this that you have heard. Swear by his sword, says the ghost.
Well said, old mole. Comes work, if you're so fast.
O worthy pioneer, once more removed, good friends. Oh, day and night, says Horatio, but this is wondrous strange. And therefore, as a stranger, give it welcome. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. But come, here, as before, never, so help you mercy, how strange or odd some error I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter shall think meet to put an antic disposition on, that you at such times, seeing me, never shall with arms encumbered thus, or this head shake, or by pronouncing some doubtful phrase as, well, we know, or we could, and if we would, or if we list to speak, or there be, and if they might, or such ambiguous giving out. To note that you know aught of me, this do swear, so grace and mercy at your most need help you. Swear, says the ghost. Rest, perturbed spirit. So, gentlemen, with all my love, I do commend me to you. And what so poor a man as Hamlet is may do to express his love and friending to you, God willing, shall not lack. Let us go in together and still your fingers on your lips, I pray. The time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. Nay, come, let's go together. They exit. That brings us to the end of Act 1. And there's just two things to point out here. One, and lots of stuff in here that I find really interesting. The idea of the ghost actually showing us bits of purgatory, but not being able to reveal everything because he's condemned to not say what he needs to say. And the fact that Hamlet gets all upset at Horatio and says there is much offense too by St. Patrick. It's a wonderful line. But notice here that on the one hand, Hamlet intends to put on a crazy facade. He intends to play as though he were crazy, and he urges the men to swear that they don't, that they know that this is an act, but they swear not to tell anybody. Why? Partly because he has to find out whether or not this is true with his uncle, and so he's being crazy so as to not be thought of as conspiring against the throne. Because see, crazy people, on the one hand, they're divinely inspired. They don't know what they're doing, and so they can't be held responsible. And secondly, therefore, they're not a threat to the throne. Crazy guy isn't going to try and get at the throne, right? So Hamlet's going to put on an act as though he were crazy. But there's an element here which is odd to me, because in a way he is crazy.
the fact that he's wrestling with these problems has kind of driven him to not know what is real and not real anymore. And so he's seeing ghosts. Is the ghost real? That's a big question that lots of people have written about. Is it real? Does the ghost actually exist? Or is it all part of Hamlet's mind, fevered brain? Well, you could argue on the one hand that the other people have seen it, Marcellus and Horatio and the two other guards. You could say, yeah, they've seen it. But it's Hamlet that calls it by the name Hamlet, or father, or king. But one could argue, but Horatio says he saw it and it looked like the old Dane. Yes? True that. So there's an element that says, no, it's real. But it's also ephemeral. It's a ghost. It's not real. So is that a visitor from another world, from this other realm? Or is the conversation that Hamlet has with the ghost all part of his own brain, his own fevered imaginings? Does Hamlet, when he encounters the ghost, encounter a real ghost or encounter himself? I'd love to see a production where the same person, as I did just now, the same person plays both roles and talks as though he were the father and flips back to Hamlet and talks as though he's the father. This is an intriguing little point that Shakespeare's bringing up here. And later when he hears the ghost, it's definitely a stage direction that the actor who plays the ghost is somewhere under the stage calling out for the men to swear. But one could play it as though the other people on stage don't hear that at all. When the ghost says, swear. Maybe that's just Hamlet. No one else responds. Horatio alone says this is wondrous strange, but maybe he's talking about Hamlet himself, because Hamlet's acting pretty darn weird at that point. Responding to voices that aren't there. Acting silly and goofy. Flipping back and forth between personalities, because he's just had this shock of encountering a ghost. So there's a lot there that you can say, maybe it is a real ghost. Maybe it isn't a real ghost. I think Shakespeare's intentionally being ambiguous because I think he's trying to delve into an element of this problem in this scholastic debate. Is there a reality out there? Or is it just a feverish concoction of our own mind? Is there a divine realm? Or is it something we've made up in order to make ourselves feel better? Is there actually a soul, right? And a heaven and a God? Or all these just categories that we use in order to understand our experience in the world? Well, that's very, what would you say, psychotic. It's a splitting of the mind and left and right. And so in some ways, when you're wrestling with those problems, you might appear as though, you're like an actor who flips from personality to personality. You're an actor on a stage. There's an odd thing. You put forth one face, but it's not your real face. You adopt a persona. Ingmar Bergman's great movie. You adopt a persona, but you yourself are not that persona. You make people think about certain things or believe certain things, but you yourself don't maybe believe them. You end up being like a Robin Williams, God rest his soul, who flips suddenly from one personality to the next. Who is the real Robin Williams? Or who was the real Robin Williams? Who is the real Hamlet? That's a fascinating little thing to think about. And if he's already dealing with this, then how is his soul not tainted? How is he to recover any love of the world? That is, how is he to not harm his mother? You can begin to see how some of these strains that Shakespeare is pulling out here influence other movies and other plays down the road. I'm thinking of one movie by Darren Aronofsky called Pi, which if you have a low threshold for violence, this is not the movie for you. But in Pi, the guy who's wrestling with these problems of mathematical reality ends up doing great violence to himself at the end. And it's, wow, what is the really real, right? Is math really real? Is the realm of mathematics a divine language, or is it something we've simply concocted as humans to understand the world? What is a 4? Is it just this? Those are just fingers, by the way. They're not numbers.
Is there a real realm of divine pattern and order and organization that we tap into? A logos, a heaven, a divine realm that emanates from being itself? Or is it simply the pattern of our synapses as they fire one to the next? Which one? And on one day, maybe it's this, and on one day, maybe it's that, and maybe you flip back and forth, and the ghost that you're seeing may be a ghost in the shell. Anime fans, there's a tip for you. Or maybe it's a ghost in the machine. For fans of philosophy and the Police. The band, the Police. Maybe it's a remnant that lingers around, a memory of some kind. Or maybe it's an imprint of the divine on us. Perhaps it's access to the divine realm. And perhaps it's just a longing for that time when we were little boys and Daddy took us in his arms. Which one is it? Well, I'm going to stop there. Because that's the problem of the play, isn't it? And if we're to do any kind of action in the world, if we're going to seek justice, then we better be damn sure that what we're doing is the right thing. Thank you all. I encourage you to check out some of the things I mentioned earlier. The American Mind podcast, excellent podcast. A history of the English language, still a fascinating podcast to be following. I'm also following some of these great characters like Victor Davis Hanson. I'm revisiting Shelby Steele. I'm revisiting Thomas Sowell. All these great thinkers that we have access to through the wonders of the internet, because they aren't yet censored on YouTube. I encourage you to go check them out yourselves. Great food for thought. I'll put some links up so you can check that out. And also check out my blog if you haven't already. I have a couple things here and there that are fun to read. And if you like what I'm doing, well, there's Patreon. Take care of yourselves. God bless. Good luck to y'all.